AP Biology, Chapter 22, Evolution, Part 6. Today we're going to be talking about evolutionary forces and what changes populations. The first force of evolutionary change is natural selection, which we've talked about a little bit already. The second one is genetic drift, which is a change to the genetics of a population over time as a result of random chance. So let's take an example for natural selection and how that works. If you have a population of insects, some with survival traits that help them blend in, so others without survival traits that help them blend in, we have natural selection happening first. In natural selection, those with beneficial traits survive and reproduce better than those that don't. In this example here, the brown bugs are blending in better than the ones that stick out, the green bugs. So natural selection favors those phenotypes that blend in better. In this case, the brown bugs are blending in better. So this natural selection, nature selecting for the brown bugs, green bugs are getting eaten. Then over time, the population changes as a result of natural selection. We have the traits of the population different from the starting population. And over time, if we have the entire population reflecting those traits, that part is evolution. Evolution is a change in genetics over time. We have the starting genetics that have the traits for green and brown bugs. And then over time, we have a change in genetics, reflecting just the brown alleles, the brown traits coded for by DNA being selected for. Natural selection, evolution. However, there's another way we can take out a trait from a gene pool, and that's random chance. If we have a population of bugs, some green and some brown, and some person walks by and just by chance squishes some of those green bugs, it wasn't because of natural selection that the green bugs were being eliminated. It was because of random chance. Then over time, if you have a population that's brown, in this case, it wasn't because brown provided a survival advantage. It's because the green alleles, the green phenotypes, were eliminated because someone stepped on them by accident. That's called genetic drift, a change to genetics as a result of chance. At this time, we're going to get some notes. Now this comes after part 5 in your notes that was assigned as homework. Evolution, let's get that definition down. It's a change in the genes and the traits that are coded for by genes over time. The two forces of change are natural selection. Here I abbreviated natural, not to be confused with the abbreviation for national. If you want to abbreviate it, you can. If you don't, you don't have to. In natural selection, we have nature selecting for traits that improve survival or reproduction. An easy example, faster bunnies are selected because slower bunnies tend to get eaten more often. We're talking adaptations to the environment or things that provide survival traits or reproduction traits becoming more common over time. The environment determines what's selected for. That's important. The mutations are random. You could have a mutation to a bear population for thick or thin fur. However, if you're in an environment that's cold, it's not going to be just luck that determines whether or not you get thin or thick fur. Only thick fur provides you a survival advantage in cold temperatures. So even though the mutations are random, what's selected for is not random. The environment determines what's selected for. Cold temperature is selected for because if you have or rather thick fur is selected for because in cold temperatures, thick fur provides you a survival advantage. You pass on those traits more often until the entire population has thick fur. Here we have genetic drift. Genetic drift is the other way genes change over time. Chance events that change genes and traits. This is a random change. Pause at this time. So we're going to focus on natural selection first. Selection acts on any trait that affects survival or reproduction, and it could be internal traits as well. We're going to be talking about predation selection, physiological selection, selection for some internal characteristics, and sexual selection, selection for traits that help you reproduce. The first one I want to talk about is predation selection. Now that includes the prey as well. It acts on both predator and prey. So we could have behaviors like herd behaviors being selected for. Prey animals that travel in herds have more eyes that can see danger coming. They also can sometimes fight off any predators, depending on the type of animal that exhibits that herd behavior. We also have animals that are active only at night. That's another selected for behavior. Prey animals, sometimes like mice, will be active at night because the animals that eat them with good eyesight, things like birds, are active during the day. Camouflage and mimicry are also selected for behaviors. Now, camouflage means blending into your environment. That's called cryptic coloration. But you can also have warning coloration selected for as well. When birds eat a monarch butterfly, they taste really bad, and they learn to avoid them because of the bright colors. So there's bright colors selected for monarchs because they act as a warning coloration to avoid getting eaten by future bird attacks. Once a bird eats one monarch, they never eat another one. However, you could have the other direction as well. You could have selection for things that blend into the environment, like leaf bugs and walking stick bugs. And over time, they look very similar to their environments because they're the ones that are surviving. Here we have the monarch butterfly being eaten and the bird learning not to eat anymore. Speed is an obvious selective advantage. If you're faster as a predator, you're able to catch more prey animals. And if you're a faster gazelle, then you're more likely to avoid getting eaten. So that's an easy one to remember. Then we have defenses. Things like horns are defenses that are selected for, also used in sexual selection depending on the organism. Plants tend to have chemical poisons and chemical defenses to keep herbivores away, like the hot peppers. At this time, we're going to get some notes. Okay, number 1. So we're going into 3 different types of natural selection. The first one's called predation selection. We have behaviors like prey being active at night, herd behaviors. We have camouflage and something called mimicry, where you can imitate other organisms. For honors biology, make sure that you just know the camouflage. I think there's a U in there. Speed selected for, whether you're predator or prey, depending on the organism. And defenses like horns or chemical like plant poisons. Rhubarb leaves are poisonous. Deadly nightshade poisonous. Keeps those herbivores away. Okay, pause at this time. The next type of selection is called physiological selection, or how the body functions. The first one, disease resistance, is an example you can use for basically your immune system is fairly robust. You're the survivor after many countless generations of selection for having a healthy immune system that can fight off diseases. And if you didn't have an immune system that could fight off at least some diseases, you probably wouldn't be here, because most of human history was a result of or had in its past many different things that like to eat us. And that's true of any plant or animal. There's diseases that affect it, and they have resistances to those diseases. Physiological efficiency, if you can imagine like your lungs increasing surface area inside in order for more oxygen to be exchanged. More oxygen in your body gives you a survival advantage because you can do more cell respiration. More cell respiration means more energy. More energy means that if you're a predator or prey, you can do more things to either get food or avoid being food. Biochemical versatility. We have selection for different proteins within us that are able to use food sources that aren't able to be used by other organisms. A carnivore can only eat meat. Herbivore can only eat vegetation. But if you have a ability to produce enzymes to break down both plants and animals, that gives you a survival advantage as an omnivore. And protection from injury, things like cuts and bruises are repairing, and those repair pathways are selected for. The ability to make proteins that clot your blood to avoid bleeding to death are selected for traits that provide a survival advantage if you avoid leaking out blood everywhere after an attack by a predator. We even have an example where fish and some frogs have a antifreeze protein that keeps their water in their cells from freezing over so they can survive sub-freezing temperatures. All right, back to our notes. And let's copy this down. Physiological selection. We have disease resistance, selection for a robust immune system. Think about also, if like you smell rotten food, why would there be a survival advantage to being able to tell rotten food? Well, imagine if you had a chemical, you were not able to detect rotten chemicals with your nasal passages, with your sense of smell. You might be eating food that's, poisonous, that has disease and bacteria in it. And if you liked eating rotten food, that could take your genes out of the gene pool if you eat the wrong kind of rotten food. So selection for a nose that can tell when things are rotten does provide a survival advantage. Physiological efficiency, things like the surface area in your lungs are increased for more oxygen use. As we'll talk about later, there's these little grape-like clusters called alveoli that are able to do that. Biochemical versatility, enzymes are able to make use of additional foods, like we're able to break down lactose as a result of lactase still being functioning in adults and mammals like us. Protection from injury, for example, blood clotting factors, able to prevent you from bleeding to death in a cut. All right, back to our notes. Then we have sexual selection, acting on reproductive success. So these are not survival traits. These are only things that get you more mates. For example, the peacock feathers on males selected for because they attract more females, and the females only mate with the males with the biggest and brightest feather displays. Fertility of gametes, got a disgusting story with that. Some primate species, not us, produce very thick fluid in the males when they have sex, and that thick fluid acts as a plug in the females to prevent other males for fertilizing those eggs. Now that's a genetic trait, producing thick fluid in the males. So in promiscuous primate species, the males produce thicker fluid to block other males' sperm from fertilizing the egg, and then that trait's passed on because it's genetic. Also, keep in mind that even if you reproduce, if your offspring don't survive to reproduce themselves, then the gene still doesn't survive. So good parenting is also a selected for trait in some creatures because it increases the chance that those offspring will in turn pass on their trait if they reach sexual maturity. Keep in mind that some things like insects don't have successful rearing offspring. They have a different strategy, which is for all our strategists just to produce so many offspring that some survive. So there's different possibilities or traits that will be selected for depending on the species. Here we have the lion's mane. That's a selected for trait. We've got some mating behaviors in deer and elk, color displays on things like birds, antlers on the alpha males of other animals that mate with antlers. Lion's mane. Females are attracted to males with larger, darker manes. It's correlated with higher testosterone levels in the males that tend to want to reproduce more, which indicates better nutrition and health, more muscle and aggression, better sperm count and fertility, more likely to get the females pregnant, and longer life. But it costs a cost to male. It imposes a cost to male. Is it worth it to produce those extra manes if it allows you to reproduce more effectively? And the answer for males is yes, but it doesn't have to be. If we're talking like a peacock feather, and if they had a lot of natural predators, it probably wouldn't be selected for because if there was a lot of natural predators, having those big, colorful peacock feathers would have been a detriment to its survival. And do we have fitness markers? Do we have things that we look for as being attractive in the opposite sex? If you're a male, is there anything here that interests you? If you're a female, is there anything here that interests you? Have you thought about what it is in your brain that's thinking about the things that lead to wanting to reproduce with different traits? All right. Sexually reproducing species tend to have two different forms. This is called sexual dimorphism. Di means two, morph means shapes, sex means two sources of genetic material. So sexual dimorphism means that there's a male and female shape or type. For example, then an obvious example would be peacocks. Peacocks have a very different male and female body type. The females are brown and more drab colored. This is a great example of sexual dimorphism. But even in humans, we have different physical features. All right, let's get back to our notes. And let's copy down sexual selection here. Attractiveness to potential male mates, not males, mates. Gamete fertility, that was the example with the primates that have thick fluid in the males to plug up any potential other males from fertilizing the females. Successful rearing of offspring. Kids must survive to reproduce. That's kind of important. Then we have sexual dimorphism, the males and females with different body plans. Now remember, sexual selection can oppose natural selection. Sometimes those sexy feathers can slow you down. So if it's something that is a detriment to your survival, it might not be selected for. All right, going back to our notes. Coevolution, co means two, coevolution means two species affecting each other's evolution. So in the example of predator and prey, we have faster gazelles being selected for by cheetahs and faster cheetahs being selected for by faster gazelles. That's coevolution. Disease and host. Also in flowers, we have the flowers being selected for different patterns because it attracts bees, and vice versa with the bees. Copy down some coevolution notes, and this ends part 6.